Hey guys, happy Memorial Day. Hope some of you are looking forward to the long weekend ahead of us. Wanted to create a video today to talk a bit about something that has been bugging me probably since I've become single. And the topic of today's discussion is essentially the realities facing single men today within the dating market. Just to give you some context, I'm a 41-year-old male, recently divorced, been single for about 18 months now. And what I'm going to share are some thoughts that I've had given my experiences, having been out in the dating market, having leveraged some of these new dating apps that a lot of kids tend to use these days, to really talk about 5 things. So number one, just to start, just to give you an idea of where the conversation is going to go, and I do have notes, so if you see me looking down, that's what I'm looking at, just to make sure I stay on track here. But number one, women have more optionality than men when it comes to dating, right? And some of you might think like, well, that's a no-brainer, especially if you're considering women between the ages of 18 and 30, right? They seem to have unlimited options. But what I'm here to tell you is that even women that are over the age of 30, hell, even over the age of 40 with multiple children, still continue to have more optionality than men. Okay, and we'll talk about that more later. Number two, so competition among men, especially middle-aged men, is at an all-time high, right? So there's lots of talk out there in the manosphere or even in red pill circles that mentions this notion of becoming a high-value man, right? My experience has shown that while it is good to be a high-value man and it's good to have, your life in order, things in place to make sure that you are living the best version of yourself, that alone does not mean that you're going to have substantially more dating options than the next guy. I know it's going to come as a shock to some of you to hear that, and it sounds like it's contradictory to what you've heard thus far from other YouTubers, but that's just been my experience. And again, I'll touch on that more later. Number three, men's attention and value has essentially been commoditized, right? In other words, men's value and the attention that they would bestow upon a worthy female is now near worthless, right? You have social media, you have the ability for women to get attention and validation at scale with little to no commitment. What that means is, in real life, a woman places less value on the attention that you, a singular individual, will ever give her, simply because she can open up her phone, post a selfie, and get 1,000 likes, depending upon how broad her social media reach is, right? That also really upsets the dynamic within the intersexual marketplace between men and women. Number four, Western men are settling for less, okay? And so going back to the point that I've made that middle-aged men have less options than women, what we tend to see in the marketplace now are women who have kids, right, with other men, sometimes multiple men. They're divorced, they come to the table with baggage, right? They're jaded. There's this degree of pessimism that middle-aged women tend to face or have. And what's more is they expect you, the man, to be okay in dealing with that. So the example I'll give you is the woman will say, hey, I have 3 children. I am not looking to have any more. You just have to be okay with that and accept me for who I am. Full stop, right? Yeah, so, and you tend to run into that more often than not. So number 5, right, and this kind of brings me to this last point. So when you sort of take all of the 4 points that I've mentioned before and think of it in terms of, well, okay, well, how are men responding to this? The answer is simple. Men are now traveling internationally in order to enhance their options. I'm not saying that this is the first time in history that men are traveling internationally to meet women and to increase their prospects. And that's been happening since the dawn of man, right? What I'm saying is given the advent of social media, given that the relative cost of travel has decreased, given how ubiquitous having passports are these days, right, it creates this dynamic where men of means will literally uproot and leave the country for purposes of finding, female companionship. So, rightly or wrongly, that's the situation. I'll touch on each of the 5 briefly, and perhaps I'll create 5 individual videos that talk about each of these in more depth. But going back to the point number 1, right, where women have more optionality than men, I'll give you the example, like a personal example about this, which really blew my mind when I first got into the dating market and started to leverage dating apps. I met a woman who was mid-40s, had 2 or 3 children, young children, had a good career. I won't say what it is, but it's definitely, a professional career. Recently divorced, right? And for all intents and purposes, she was average at best, meaning if you saw her in the supermarket by the, produce aisle, you wouldn't turn your head, okay? So met her at Starbucks, met her on Bumble, the dating app, which is an app that enables women to make the first move. And we got to talking about our experiences on the app. And she shared that she had over 3,000 matches in the 3 months that she had been on the app. So if you assume 1,000 matches per month, and you kind of do the math even further, what you're finding is that she had a substantial amount of options. And so one might assume like, well, okay, maybe, they varied in quality, right? Maybe you had a ton of losers or whatever. No, the majority of these men were CEOs, lawyers, doctors, entrepreneurs, very quote unquote high value individuals, right? Who were probably also on their second or third, relationship. And that really blew me away, right? Because I didn't have 3,000 matches in 3 months, okay? I think I had something, on the order of, call it 100 or 10x less than that. So maybe 100 matches, right? Or 300 matches for 3 months, right? Which even as I say that out loud sounds like a lot, but it's not. So that really helped underscore the point that the marketplace, at least as it relates to dating apps, is really heavily skewed towards women, okay? So, my advice there is if you are newly single and you are entering into this space for the first time, sure, try the dating apps out just to get a sense for how things are currently working, and perhaps it might be a good way to, put some leads in the top of your funnel, if you know what I mean, but by no means should you rely solely on that, because you will not be able to compete, right? Like, the top 1% of men on dating apps effectively capture 80-90% of the women there. So why even waste your time? Number 2, and this kind of goes back to this other point about competition amongst middle-aged men being at an all-time high. So as a middle-aged man, you do not have the luxury of being in a place like a school where you're forced to get to know people as part of taking class, right? So, high school, college, grad school, you were forced to be in a room with a person, right, for as long, the quarter, the semester, and through that interaction, you got to know them, and that became like an organic way to build out a relationship. As a middle-aged man, you don't have that luxury anymore. Why? Because you just have life that you're dealing with, right? You have your career, you have your pursuits that you do after work, right? The time that it takes for you to, stay in the gym, keep your physique together, all of that. So unless you're part of, some pretty broad like social networking events, right? Like, call it like your local business leaders club or meeting, whatever, right? Like some sort of professional meeting, like the opportunities to meet women are greatly reduced just by virtue of your life being different. That being said, a lot of successful men that I've encountered also leverage these dating apps, right? They'll leverage dating apps in conjunction with, maybe introductions through friends of friends, but by and large, just by virtue of how much time it takes to meet someone organically, they will tend to leverage dating apps just in the course of their day, right? Because it's easy. You open up the app, you swipe right or left, boom, done. So what that means is busy men who are leveraging dating apps are effectively competing against each other for average women, okay? And real quick before I lose this point, the reason why I say average women is very attractive women do not need to be on dating apps, right? So if there's a woman who is like clearly like objectively cute or above, right? So it's like universally understood that, yeah, she's cute or above. She does not need to leverage a dating app. Like for her, just leaving her house, going to the gym will be enough to capture several leads just by virtue of men finding her attractive and approaching her, okay? So you will not find extremely hot women. And again, you might, but it might be because they're there to get followers for their Instagram, that they're probably looking for followers for OnlyFans, right? It's not for the reason that you would think, okay? So what that means is, by and large, the women that are on these dating apps are considered to be average at best, okay? So jumping back to point number 3, men's attention and value has been commoditized. So by virtue of numbers 1 and 2, right, points 1 and 2, our value as men has decreased substantially because women are now able to reach outside what would have been considered geographical boundaries, right? So for example, your grandparents, they were limited to their immediate network, right? So whether that would have been school, church, whatever the 50-mile radius was that they lived in, typically ring-fenced the pool of potential suitors that they can entertain, right? That boundary no longer exists. A woman can essentially, create a profile, live in Los Angeles, and be liked by some gentleman who's in Saudi Arabia, who is effectively an oil sheik, who will have no issue putting her on a plane to Dubai or Saudi Arabia, right, for time. Do you see my point? So that means that if you're an average man, and by average I mean you have your shit together, you have a normal job, you pay your taxes, right? You're not you don't have a life full of drama. You are not dealing with these top tier women just by virtue of being priced out of the market, because these women now have extended their reach beyond their geographical boundaries. So that's kind of the value piece. Now, from an attention perspective, as we moved on to adopt social media, right, as a society and a culture, that meant that we were, spending inordinate amounts of time scrolling through profiles, liking, subscribing, following, doing all this bullshit, right? But within that, women were able to effectively set up systems that allowed them to get validation at scale, right? So instead of having to, go to class and, field interest from 2 or 3 guys who might have expressed, a desire to go out with her, right, during the day, she can effectively post a selfie on social media, get 1,000 likes with no interaction with that individual, right? And what better way to boost one's self-esteem than to get, a bunch of likes and a bunch of comments from guys who are just, expressing how much they're interested in the person, right? So, so that being said, our attention has been commoditized, our value has been commoditized, and now, given the rise of platforms like OnlyFans, women are now able to take it a step further and monetize this value, right, and attention that effectively they get from us for little to nothing. And then on top of that, we pay for more interaction, which is just insane when you think about it. So going back to number 4, right, so Western men are settling for less. Yeah, 100%. So if a guy today, a normal guy, isn't willing to say, follow women on social media, and be subject to their thirst trap type social media posts, if we're not willing to subscribe to their OnlyFans page, so then the question becomes, well, what does that really realistically leave you with, right? Because the hot ones know they're hot, and therefore they're going to monetize their beauty while they still have it, okay? Whereas the average ones, they might say, well, okay, I'm not posting on social media as much, I'm not leveraging OnlyFans, but what that means is I can now dictate the type of men that I want. And so therefore, this enables average women to get effectively what we would consider to be high value men, normal high value men, right? Because again, I'll make the point one more time just in case I didn't make that a point very poignant. Women that are exceedingly attractive, call them 8s, 9s, and 10s, are essentially mercenaries, hired guns, meaning they are reserved specifically for the most successful and those who have the deepest pockets and those who can enable the lifestyle that is Instagram worthy, okay? So the way a woman these days, that is the modern woman who's focused on leveraging social media, the way she gets value is absorbing the value of others, okay, for the purpose of getting likes and subscribes and follows, okay? So if you ever seen certain females posting pictures of themselves from a yacht, okay, well, I'm pretty sure the yacht isn't hers. Like, I'm pretty sure it's not. She's not posting the picture of the owner of the yacht. She's simply posting a picture of herself on that yacht. Right? And all that does is it gets some more likes, follows, and interest and envy from other women. And the women then replicate that, and then it becomes this sort of virtuous cycle, right? So by virtue of that, what it means is average men are now left to settle for, above average men are now settling for average or less than average women. And that's why I say competition amongst men is now at an all-time high, because again, our options are less. So, the guy, with the 6-figure job, who's in shape, no drama, pays his taxes, has his career, has his head screwed on straight, right? Historically, he might have commanded a higher value or a better looking female. That same guy is no longer able to command that same type of a time and attention from a high value female. Not today, right? Or at least not in the same way that one could. You literally have to be an athlete, like a professional athlete, making millions of dollars a year, right? Have a lifestyle that's akin to, someone like a Dan Bilzerian, right? In order to actually capture the attention of very, very attractive women, the 8s, 9s, and 10s. Like, that's literally the lifestyle you have to lead. And that's why you'll hear from these guys like, oh, be the best version of yourself, be the alpha male, this, that, and the other. It's like, hey man, that's great, but that strategy only works when there's initial interest from the jump, okay? And so here's the example I'll give you. If you do not have the attention of an 8, 9, or a 10, she's not even evaluating whether or not you are considered to be high value, okay? So you have to do something to demonstrate your repertoire of skills that make you high value to let them see that you're even worth their time, right? And so just by explaining that step, it basically means that men have to demonstrate higher value without even being able to engage with the woman these days. And so that's how people who have like these large social media followings are able to do it, right? They built this persona on social media, like for example, Dan Bilzerian, not knocking him, more power to his hustle because he figured it out very quickly and monopolized on it or capitalized on it. Built this lifestyle, made it very attractive for females to want to interact and participate in that lifestyle, and it just sort of snowballed, right? And so for women, right, it becomes a status symbol to say, hey, I went to one of Dan's parties, right? So if you're an average guy who just simply goes to your 9-to-5 job, pays your bills on time, pays your taxes, dude, you've effectively just been, your value relative to those 8s, 9s, and 10s is very little because they don't want average. They want something that gets likes and clicks and follows, right? Okay, so all of that being said, we come back to this last point again. Men are traveling internationally to expand their options, right? So recognizing that it's very difficult for small fish to compete in a large pond, right? You have many average men going to other countries, like first and second world countries now, so that they can compete in much smaller ponds. That strategy absolutely works. And it's a phenomenon. It's not even a phenomenon. It's trending as, quote unquote, passport bros, right? So dudes with passports go elsewhere to figure out how they can be treated better. I don't disagree with it. I actually think it makes a ton of sense because the culture today is so pervasive here in the US and in the West in general that there is no way one singular guy will be able to change it. First and foremost, full stop. Number one. Number two, the ability to elevate yourself such that you can become like a Dan Bilzerian or like a professional athlete, such that you have the lifestyle, the assets that warrant attention and time from 8s, 9s, and 10s. That's a Herculean effort, and most guys will never attain it. They won't. They won't, right? And also, it probably isn't a good strategy to build your life around that as the singular outcome, right? Because that's very short-sighted and shallow, and probably won't bring you happiness in the long run either. So that I say all that to say, guys are flying to places like Colombia. They're flying to places like Southeast Asia, like Thailand, Philippines, Vietnam, right? They're flying to Eastern Europe, right? Because they know that it's easier to compete in these sexual marketplaces there, right? Because, the strength of the dollar relative to that local currency. Let's just be frank, right? That's what it is. But also, some of the women in these countries also have aspirations to leave said country and date a Western male, right? Just because of the perceived value we bring. I would argue that women in those countries, like their perspectives about dating relationships and the role that men plays within them is akin to how the US was probably in the 1950s and 60s, right? That's not to say that some women there haven't caught up with the notion of what's going on, right? And such that, the role that social media plays in dating and the fact that they can extract value from men with little effort and time. But by and large, that has been the one solution that appears to be working today. So anyway, long story short, this video is getting a bit long, but I hope I've conveyed to you really the realities facing, single men today. And, I'll look to make some more videos that go into each of these topics in more depth. But until then, feel free to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell down below to get notified of my future posts. All right, until next time, I'll see you soon. Take care.